Hello, I'm Aiden Blake, 35 years old, standing in a quiet corner of my parents' backyard in Colorado Springs, Colorado, holding a cold beer, watching the twinkling lights strung across the pine trees for Thanksgiving. Laughter echoes from the familiar crowd, family, friends, and a few neighbors, gathered around the outdoor dining table. My mother, Margaret, is busy arranging plates of pumpkin pie, while my father, retired Colonel James Blake, stands among a group of fellow veterans, recounting his Desert Storm story for the 100th time. I smile and nod when someone glances my way, but inside I feel like a shadow. No one here knows the truth. No one knows that I, Aiden Blake, the guy they think is a mundane logistics worker, am actually a colonel in Delta Force, the most elite special operations unit in the U.S. Army. I don't blame them. It's the cover I've chosen, or rather the cover my job forces me to wear. For national security, for the safety of those I love, and for the top secret missions I've poured blood, sweat, and fragments of my soul into, I must live a lie. To my family, I'm the failure, the eldest son who left the military after a mysterious injury and transitioned to a civilian desk job in supply chain management. A boring, safe, unremarkable job in a family steeped in military glory like the Blakes. But the truth is an entirely different beast, and it's roaring in my chest, begging to be let out. Before I tell you what happens next, let me know where you're reading from. Drop a like if you've ever had to hide your success from those who doubt you. I grew up in the shadow of the Blake family's military tradition. Colorado Springs, with its majestic Rocky Mountains and crisp air, was where every child in our family was raised on stories of courage, honor, and duty. My father, James, was an Army colonel who fought in 2 wars and brought home a cabinet full of medals. He's the kind of man who commands a room not just because of his imposing presence, but because of the stories he tells, stories of soldiers surviving under fire, of life or death decisions on the battlefield. My mother, Margaret, is a strong woman who always supported my father, but also set sky-high expectations for her 3 children. Me, my younger sister Lily, and my younger brother Connor. As the eldest, I was destined to follow in my father's footsteps. I remember evenings around the dinner table when my father would talk about his days in Vietnam, his eyes alight with pride. "Aiden," he'd say, pointing at me with a half-serious smile, "you're going to do great things. The Blakes don't produce ordinary men." I was only 10, but those words etched themselves into my mind like a vow. I never wanted to disappoint him. I excelled in school, performed well in sports, and when I entered West Point Military Academy, I was one of the top cadets in my class. I could run 5 miles with a 40-pound pack without breaking a sweat, shoot a rifle with pinpoint accuracy, and tackle tactical exercises like they were puzzles. But what set me apart, according to my instructors, was my ability to stay calm under pressure. "Blake," one commander told me, "you've got the coolest head I've ever seen. You were born for big things." And I did big things. After West Point, I was selected for Delta Force, a chance only a fraction of a percent of the military could dream of. Delta isn't something you apply for and walk into. They choose you, test you, and if you're not strong enough, they cut you without mercy. I survived the grueling months of training at Fort Bragg, where I learned to endure deserts, jungles, and suffocating interrogation rooms. I learned to shoot faster than a heartbeat, defuse bombs, and lead a special ops team through the most dangerous places on Earth. When I officially joined Delta Force, I knew I'd found where I belonged. But with that glory came a cost. Delta Force isn't just a job, it's a secret. No one, not even my family, could know. To protect the missions and keep my loved ones safe, I had to build a cover. And so, Aiden Blake, the promising West Point graduate, became Aiden Blake, the unremarkable logistics worker who left the military after a vague injury. The cover story was carefully crafted by my superiors. It was vague enough to avoid questions, but boring enough that no one would dig deeper. I take a sip of my beer, looking across the yard where Connor stands, tall and confident in his crisp Marine uniform. My younger brother, 30 years old, was recently promoted to major, and the family is beaming with pride. Connor has always been the star of the Blake family, not because I wasn't good, but because I chose to live in the shadows. Connor doesn't know that. No one does except my unit and a handful of senior officers at the Pentagon. I remember the first time I lied to my family. I was 27, fresh off a mission in Iraq where my team stopped a suicide bombing aimed at a crowded marketplace. We saved hundreds of lives, but I took a shrapnel wound to the shoulder. It was the perfect excuse for my cover. When I returned home, I told my parents I'd been injured in a training accident and decided to leave the military for civilian work. My father looked at me, his eyes full of disappointment. "Aiden," he said, his voice low, "I thought you were stronger than that." Those words cut like a knife. But I couldn't tell the truth. I couldn't say I'd just led a team through an IS-infested area, taken out 3 enemies in a pitch-black night, or received a classified medal in a discreet ceremony at a base in Germany. Instead, I nodded and said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I just want a quiet life." From then on, everything changed. Family gatherings became a silent battle with myself. Whenever my father recounted his military days or Connor eagerly shared his Marine missions, I sat there, smiling, nodding, and answering questions about my job with vague responses. "Oh, just warehouse management," I'd say, or shipping logistics, nothing exciting. Each lie was a stone weighing on my chest. I glance at my mother, who's smiling brightly as Connor tells a funny story about boot camp. She's always been the gentlest in the family, but even she can't hide her disappointment in me. "Aiden, are you okay?" she often asks, her voice laced with worry, as if I'm a fragile piece of glass. I always say I'm fine, but her eyes tell me she doesn't believe it. She thinks I gave up on my dreams, that I wasn't strong enough to follow the military path like my father and Connor. Lily, my sister, is the only one who doesn't judge. She's an elementary school teacher, not part of the family's military tradition, but still caught up in its culture of honor. Lily always tries to pull me into conversations, asking about my job, my life, but I know she senses the invisible wall between us. "Aiden, you should talk more about your work," she once said, half joking. "I bet you've got stories more interesting than you let on." I just smiled and changed the subject. The truth is, I do have stories I can't tell. Like the time I led my team through a Syrian village, rescuing 12 hostages from a rebel group. Or the time I interrogated a terrorist leader in a dark bunker, using every psychological skill I'd learned to extract information that saved thousands of lives. Those stories aren't for the family dinner table. They're sealed in classified files, known only to those with the highest clearance. Tonight, that wall feels thicker than ever. I look at Connor, surrounded by people patting his shoulder and congratulating him. I'm proud of my brother, truly. But every compliment for Connor is a reminder that I can't share my own glory. I used to think I could handle it, the isolation, the misunderstanding. But lately it's started to eat at me. There are nights I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it's worth it. Do the medals hidden in a safe in my apartment mean anything when my family sees me as a failure? I set my beer down and step away from the crowd, letting the cool Colorado Springs air calm the storm in my mind. I look up at the starry sky, and for a moment I'm back in the Afghan desert under that same sky, preparing for a raid on an enemy stronghold. There I'm Colonel Blake, the fearless leader. Here I'm just Aiden, the disappointing older brother. But then from behind I hear my father's voice. "Aiden, what are you doing out here alone?" He steps closer, his sharp eyes studying me as if trying to read something. I smile and shrug. "Just getting some fresh air, Dad." He nods, but I see the doubt in his eyes. "You know," he says, his voice low, "I always hoped you'd find your path. The Blakes don't produce ordinary men." I swallow hard, the weight of the lie heavier than ever. "I know, Dad," I say, my voice hoarse. "I'm trying." But as I turn back to the glow of the party, I know that one day the truth will have to come out. And when it does, I'm not sure if my family will feel proud or betrayed by what I've kept from them. I stand there, in the chill of Colorado Springs, my breath forming faint white clouds in the air. The star-filled sky above reminds me of those long nights in the Syrian desert, where the moonlight was the only guide for my team through dusty, danger-laden paths. I close my eyes, and for a moment I'm no longer in my parents' backyard. I'm in a small village near Raqqa, 2019, leading a 6-man team on a hostage rescue mission. That night, the air was heavy with the smell of gunpowder and sand. We moved like ghosts, slipping silently through narrow alleys where crumbling clay walls hid IS fighters. I, Colonel Aiden Blake, led the Delta Force team, codenamed Ghost, for my ability to vanish and reappear without a trace. Our mission was to rescue a group of Western journalists held hostage in a fortified house at the village's center. We had only hours before the terrorists would carry out their execution threat. I remember every heartbeat, steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. My team, consisting of Hawk with his razor-sharp sniper skills, Doc with his life-saving medical expertise, and Viper with his lightning-fast bomb disposal, moved on my hand signals. We breached the door, neutralized 4 gunmen in 10 seconds, and found the hostages in a dark basement. One of them, a female journalist, looked at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "Thank you." I thought I was going to die. In moments like that, I felt proud of the path I'd chosen. Then Lily's voice pulls me back to reality. She's waving, calling me back to the table. "Aiden, come on. Connor's about to tell a story about his training in Okinawa." I smile, walking toward the light, but inside I feel a void. Connor's stories, entertaining as they are ones he can share. Me. I can only sit there, listen, and pretend my life is a string of dull office days. Family gatherings like this are always a challenge. I remember one Christmas 2 years ago when my father asked me point blank in front of everyone, "Aiden, what do you actually do at that company? Just sit around counting containers?" His tone carried a hint of mockery, as if he couldn't believe his eldest son had chosen such an ordinary life. I smiled, shrugged, and said, "Something like that, Dad. Steady job, no complaints." In those moments, he'd give me a look of disappointment tinged with disdain. My mother always tries to be sympathetic, but her questions, "Aiden, are you sure you're happy?" only make me feel pitied. Once, while I was helping her wash dishes after dinner, she took my hand and said, "You know, you don't have to compare yourself to Connor. As long as you're living well, I'm happy." Those words, though kind, felt like another knife. She thought I needed comfort, that I was struggling to find meaning in a normal life. I just nodded, smiled, and said, "I'm fine, Mom." But I wasn't fine. I'm tired of living with lies. Connor, my brother, is the hardest to face. He doesn't mean to hurt me, but his enthusiasm, his stories about Marine missions, the medals he proudly displays, makes me feel pushed to the sidelines. Once he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Aiden, if you want, I can introduce you to some people in military logistics. Maybe you'll find something more exciting." I laughed it off, but inside I wanted to say, "Connor, I'm doing things you can't even imagine." But I couldn't. Not because I don't trust him, but because I know one wrong word could expose my identity, endangering the safety of our entire family. I sit down at the table next to Lily, trying to blend into the festive atmosphere. Connor's telling a story about leading a group of new recruits through an obstacle course. Everyone laughs as he describes one clumsy guy face-planting into the mud. I laugh along, but my mind drifts to another memory. "Aiden, what are you daydreaming about?" My mother's voice pulls me back. I startle, realizing I've been silent too long. "Nothing, Mom," I say with a forced smile. "Just a bit tired." Suddenly, my phone buzzes in my pocket. I glance at the screen. An encrypted number, one that can only be from my unit. My heart beats faster. I stand, excuse myself, and step away from the party into a dark corner of the garden. "Blake here," I say softly when I answer. "Ghost, we have an emergency." General Harper's voice comes through, tense but controlled. "A high-value target just surfaced in Yemen. We need you at the base in 6 hours." I glance over my shoulder, seeing my family still laughing around the table. Connor's raising a glass in a toast and my father's nodding proudly. I want to stay, to savor this rare moment, but duty doesn't wait. Understood, sir, I say, voice low. I'll be there. As I hang up, I feel the familiar rush of adrenaline surge through me. I return to the table, keeping my expression neutral. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, I say calmly. Something came up at work. I have to go now. My father frowns. In the middle of Thanksgiving? What kind of logistics emergency is that, Aiden? His voice is thick with skepticism, and I see Connor and Lily's eyes turn to me. Just a shipment issue, I say, keeping my tone even though inside I know I'm heading into a mission I might not return from. I'll be back as soon as I can. As I leave the party, climbing into my beat-up old truck, part of my civilian cover, I feel the shadow of Aiden Blake, the logistics worker, weighing on me. But as I drive toward the base, I know Ghost is taking over, ready to face whatever challenge awaits. 3 weeks after General Harper's urgent call, I return from Yemen, my body exhausted but my mind still sharp. The mission was a race against time. A high-ranking terrorist leader known as Black Hawk had surfaced in a secret desert base. My team was tasked with capturing him alive to extract intelligence about a series of impending attacks. We infiltrated the base under cover of darkness, moving through claustrophobic corridors rigged with traps and guarded by sentries. I still remember the moment I faced Black Hawk, his steel-cold eyes and a smug smile on his lips. "You'll never break my network," he said. But I proved him wrong. We captured him, extracted the intel, and stopped a bombing that could have killed hundreds in a European city. But as I sit on the military flight back to the US, I don't feel victorious. I just feel drained. Not because of the mission, I'm used to those challenges, but because of the cost of silence. When the plane lands at Andrews Air Force Base, I stow my combat gear, slip back into a plain button-up shirt and jeans, and become Aiden Blake, logistics worker. I wonder how many more times I can keep living these two lives. 4 years later today, I'm driving to Camp Pendleton, California for Connor's promotion ceremony. My younger brother has just been promoted to major, a major milestone in his Marine Corps career. My family has flown in from Colorado Springs, and I know they expect me to be there, even if just as Aiden, the logistics brother. I drive along the coastal roads, the bright California sun streaming through the window, but my mind is stuck on memories of Yemen and the countless times I've faced my father's disappointed gaze. Camp Pendleton is a world of discipline and honor. As I step into the ceremony area, I see rows of Marines standing ramrod straight in their crisp dress uniforms, American and Marine Corps flags snapping in the breeze. The crowd, families, friends, and senior officers, gathers around the main stage where Connor and other officers will be honored. I choose a spot in the back, near a row of palm trees, trying to blend into the crowd. I'm wearing a navy polo and khakis, the perfect image of a harmless civilian. My family is seated in the front row, a few meters away. My father, in a gray suit, sits with his back straight, his proud gaze fixed on the stage. My mother, in an elegant floral dress, clutches a handkerchief, clearly emotional. Lily, sitting beside her, scans the crowd, probably looking for me. I give a small wave when she spots me, and she smiles, but I know I can't join them just yet. I need to keep my distance, not just to maintain my cover, but to protect myself from questions I can't answer. The ceremony begins with a trumpet fanfare, followed by a speech from a Marine Corps colonel. I listen, but my mind wanders. I think of the secret ceremonies I've attended, windowless rooms where I was awarded medals for missions no one outside my unit knows about. Those ceremonies had no audience, no family, just quiet handshakes and whispered, "Good work, Blake." I wonder if Connor realizes how lucky he is to stand in the spotlight, his moment of glory witnessed by family and friends. When Connor's name is called, I see my brother stride onto the stage, confident and strong. The crowd claps, and I hear my mother choke up. My father stands, clapping heartily, a radiant smile on his face. I clap too, but from my shadowed corner it feels like I'm in another world. Connor deserves this, I know. But part of me is jealous, not of his success, but of the freedom to display it openly. After the pinning ceremony, the event shifts to a reception. The honored officers mingle with the crowd, shaking hands and posing for photos with their families. I see Connor hug Mom, shake Dad's hand, and joke with Lily. I start to move toward them to offer my congratulations, but hold back. I don't want to draw attention, don't want to face questions like, "Aiden, how's your job?" Or "Why didn't you stay in the military like Connor?" Instead, I stay put, watching from afar, trying to blend into the crowd like an outsider. But then I feel eyes on me. I turn and catch General Harper, my former commander from several Middle East operations, standing a few meters away, talking to a group of Marine officers. Harper is a tall, silver-haired man with eyes sharp as razors. He's seen me at my most dangerous, like that time in Syria when I led my team through a minefield to rescue hostages. He also deployed me on the Yemen mission 4 years ago. He knows who I am, what I've done. I try to turn away, hoping he doesn't recognize me in my civilian clothes. But it's too late. Harper strides over, a grin spreading across his face. "Colonel Blake," he calls out, his voice clear and loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Didn't expect to see you here." My heart stops. I see my mother turn, her eyes wide. My father frowns as if he thinks he misheard. Connor, standing a few steps away, looks at me with confusion. Lily just smiles as if she thinks it's a joke. But I know there's no escaping this moment. "Sir," I say, keeping my voice low, trying to stay calm. "Just Aiden now. I'm not in the military anymore." I hope Harper picks up the cue, realizes I'm trying to maintain my cover. But whether from excitement or a lapse in judgment, he presses on. "Not in the military? Come on, Blake. You're one of the best Delta Force ever had. Remember the Raqqa op? You saved our whole team from a damn trap." He laughs heartily, clapping my shoulder. But each word is a hammer blow to the wall of secrecy I've built over the years. I see my father step forward, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Aiden," he says, his voice low but sharp. "What's this about? Colonel? Delta Force?" My mother and Connor draw closer, and I feel the weight of dozens of eyes from the crowd. I want to run, to vanish like the ghost I was on the battlefield. But I know I can't. The moment I've dreaded for years has arrived. I take a deep breath, feeling the world slow down. "Dad, Mom, Connor," I begin, my voice hoarse with tension. "There are things I've never told you. Not because I wanted to hide them, but because I had to. For national security, for the safety of our family." My father crosses his arms, his gaze boring into me. "Speak, Aiden. Tell the truth." I glance around, seeing Harper standing there, finally realizing what he's done. He gives a slight nod, as if giving me permission to go on. And so, I do. "I never left the military," I say, my voice growing steadier. "I'm a colonel in Delta Force, the Army's Special Operations Unit. My work is classified. I couldn't tell anyone, not even you. The logistics job, leaving the military, that was a cover. I had to do it to protect you and to complete my missions." Silence falls. My mother covers her mouth, her eyes welling up. Connor stares at me like I'm a stranger, but in his eyes I see a mix of shock and admiration. My father, always the stoic one, stands frozen as if processing the information. "Delta Force?" he repeats, his voice low. You've been in Delta Force this whole time?" I nod. "Yes, Dad. I've led operations in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. I've done things I can't go into detail about, but I never gave up my path. I just couldn't let you know." My mother steps forward, wrapping her arms around me, tears soaking my shoulder. "Aiden, why didn't you say anything? We thought—" She trails off, her voice breaking. "We thought you weren't strong enough." I hug her back, a lump in my throat. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't have a choice." Connor steps forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Aiden," he says, his voice shaky. "You're a colonel? You're Ghost?" I manage a weak smile. "That's my call sign." The ceremony ends, but my family isn't ready to leave. We sit in a quiet corner of the base under the shade of a large palm tree. I tell them part of the truth, what I'm allowed to share. I talk about West Point, the grueling training to join Delta Force, the sleepless nights on the battlefield. I don't go into mission details, but I say enough for them to understand I've lived a life they never imagined. My father, who's always been the hardest on me, sits silently for most of the story. Finally, he looks at me and says, "Aiden, I was wrong. I thought you gave up, but you've gone beyond anything I ever did." In his voice, I hear respect, something I've craved for so long. Connor, as a fellow serviceman, peppers me with questions about Delta Force, about missions, about how I kept it secret for so long. I answer what I can, and for the first time, I feel a real connection with my brother. Lily, as always, just smiles and says, "I knew it, Aiden. I always knew you weren't ordinary." As we leave Camp Pendleton, I feel a weight lifted. But I also know this truth will change everything. My family will see me differently, but I'll still have to live with secrets I can't share. And deep down, I fear that this moment, though liberating, might bring consequences I haven't yet foreseen. 3 days after the ceremony, I received an encrypted email from Delta Force Command. The subject was simple: urgent summons. My heart sank as I opened it, though I'd tried to brace myself for this. The message called me to a meeting at Fort Bragg with a brief note regarding breach of security protocols. I knew immediately that the moment General Harper called me Colonel Blake in front of the crowd hadn't gone unnoticed by security overseers. I took an early flight to North Carolina, my mind in turmoil. For 10 years in Delta Force, I'd lived by an ironclad rule: no disclosures, no boasting, no traces. My cover was a shield, protecting not just me, but my family, my teammates, and the missions we'd bled for. But at Camp Pendleton, through no direct fault of my own, that wall of secrecy had crumbled. I wondered how I could justify myself, or whether the career I'd sacrificed everything to build would vanish over one careless moment. At Fort Bragg, I entered a cold, windowless meeting room with a long table and 3 senior officers seated across from me. Colonel Marcus Reed, head of Delta Force's Security Division, fixed me with a razor-sharp gaze. Beside him were 2 other officers, one from the Pentagon, the other from military intelligence. The air in the room was heavy, like I was walking into a courtroom. "Colonel Blake," Reed began, his voice cold but controlled, "you know why you're here. The incident at Camp Pendleton was reported. A Marine officer present at the ceremony overheard your conversation with General Harper, and that information reached us. You confirmed your identity to civilians, including your family. This is a serious violation of Delta Force security protocols." I sat up straight, trying to keep my face calm, but inside I felt like I was being suffocated. "Sir," I said, my voice steady, "I didn't intend to disclose anything. General Harper inadvertently addressed me by my rank in front of my family. I only confirmed the truth to manage the situation and prevent further suspicion." Reed frowned, flipping through a file in front of him. "You know there's no room for inadvertent in our work, Blake. Delta Force exists in the shadows. One wrong word can endanger operations, your teammates, and yourself." I nodded, not arguing. I knew he was right. In Delta Force's world, there's no margin for error. But I also knew the truth's exposure wasn't entirely my fault. I wanted to mention Harper's role, but wasn't one to shift blame. Instead, I said, "Sir, I understand the gravity of the situation. I'm prepared to accept any consequences." The Pentagon officer, a woman with piercing eyes, spoke up. "Colonel Blake, your record is impressive. Raqqa, Baghdad, Yemen. You've saved hundreds of lives and stopped major threats. But that doesn't exempt you from accountability. We've discussed suspension or even termination from Delta Force." Her words hit like a punch to the chest. Delta Force wasn't just my job, it was my essence, where I found meaning in a chaotic world. Losing it would be like losing a piece of my soul. I bowed my head, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I understand, ma'am. I only ask that you consider the circumstances and my past contributions. The meeting paused for deliberation, and I was asked to wait in the hallway. I sat on a hard plastic chair, staring at the floor, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I thought of my family, the proud look in my father's eyes at Pendleton, my mother's embrace, Connor's smile when he called me Ghost. Were those moments worth risking my career? The door opened and I startled when General Harper walked in. He was in full dress uniform, his face stern but not harsh. "Blake," he said, his voice low. "Come with me." We stepped into a small office nearby and he closed the door. "Aiden," he said, using my first name for the first time in years. "I heard about the meeting. I know I caused this. I was careless at Pendleton, and I won't let you take the full fall." I shook my head, trying to protest. "Sir, it wasn't your fault. I confirmed the truth to my family. I could have handled it better." Harper raised a hand, signaling me to stop. "You're one of the best soldiers I've ever commanded, Blake." I spoke to Reed and the others. I reminded them of what you've done. Raqqa, Yemen, and that op in Afghanistan where you saved my entire team from an ambush. They can't overlook your value. A flicker of hope sparked, but I remained cautious. "What did they say, sir?" Harper gave a faint smile. "They agreed to lessen the punishment. You'll be suspended for 2 months, no operations, and you'll need to complete additional security training. But you're staying with Delta Force. Your record is too strong for them to cut you over an unintentional mistake." I exhaled, feeling like a boulder had been lifted from my chest. "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Harper replied. "Just keep doing what you do best. But next time I slip up, punch me, all right?" He chuckled, and I couldn't help but smile back. Leaving Fort Bragg, I felt both relief and weight. 2 months of suspension wasn't ideal, but compared to losing my career, it was a small price. I knew I'd been lucky, not just because of Harper's intervention, but because of the record I'd built over the years. Yet I also knew the Pendleton incident had changed everything, not just with my family, but within myself. On the flight back to Colorado Springs, I reflected on what had happened. I'd lived in the shadows too long, and though the truth's exposure was an accident, it gave me something I'd never had: my family's recognition. But I also realized I couldn't let myself get caught in moments like that again. Delta Force is where I belong, and to stay there I must continue living with secrets, even if it means keeping distance from those I love. 7 years have passed since that fateful ceremony at Camp Pendleton. And now, at 42, I'm no longer the ghost, silently leading teams through smoke-filled battlefields. I've transitioned to a command role, strategizing for Delta Force from a safer office at Fort Bragg. My work now involves analyzing intelligence, coordinating covert operations, and training the next generation of elite soldiers. But though my role has changed, the responsibility remains as heavy as ever. And today, as I prepare for my promotion ceremony to Major General, a milestone I never dared dream of, I know my family will finally see me in the light. Not as Aiden Blake, the logistics worker, but as Major General Aiden Blake, a soldier of honor. 7 years ago, when my true identity was exposed at Pendleton, I thought it was the beginning of the end. 2 months of suspension, additional security training, and scrutinizing looks from my superiors made me question whether I still had a place in Delta Force. But General Harper, with his timely intervention, pulled me back from the brink. And I, determined not to let that mistake define me, continued to prove my worth through every mission, every plan, every life or death decision. Over the years, I've shifted from the battlefield to the desk, not because I lost my fire, but because Delta Force needed my mind more than my gun. I became the architect of major operations like dismantling a terrorist funding network in East Africa, or rescuing a group of diplomats in Mali. These missions no longer required me to dive into the line of fire, but they still brought that familiar adrenaline rush. The feeling of knowing each decision could save or cost hundreds of lives. This shift also brought an unexpected benefit. I could be safer in sharing some truth with my family. With no more direct involvement in covert operations, the risks of them knowing my role diminished significantly. Delta Force still required me to keep details classified, but my status as a senior officer was no longer a secret to guard absolutely. And that opened a new chapter in my relationship with my family. After the Pendleton incident, my family's view of me transformed. My father, retired Colonel James Blake, once my harshest critic, became my proudest supporter. I remember the first evening after returning from Fort Bragg when he invited me into his study, a room filled with military memorabilia from medals to photos of him in uniform. He sat down, poured 2 glasses of whiskey and said, "Aiden, I was wrong about you. I thought you gave up, but you've done things I never dared dream of." Those simple, heartfelt words broke down the wall between us. From then on, he started asking about my work, not specific details, as he understood Delta Force's rules. I told him about my days at West Point, the lessons I learned from commanders. Sometimes I shared non-classified stories like training a team of young soldiers at Fort Bragg. He listened, his eyes alight, and for the first time in my life I felt he truly saw me. My mother, Margaret, carried a different kind of pain. She felt guilty for the years she misunderstood me, for her unintentional words like, "Aiden, are you okay?" or, "As long as you're happy, I'm happy." During one family dinner, she took my hand and said, "Aiden, I'm sorry for not believing in you. I just want you to know I'm proud, not just of what you've done, but of who you are." I hugged her, feeling the warmth I'd longed for, and I knew the wounds between us were healing. Connor, my brother, changed the most. As a Marine Corps major, he'd unknowingly hurt me with his boasts about his career, unaware I was living a life 100 times more dangerous. After Pendleton, he made an effort to reconnect. We started talking regularly, and sometimes he'd fly to Fort Bragg to visit. Over beers at a bar near the base, he looked at me and said, "Aiden, I thought I was the family hero. Turns out you're the real one." "Ghost, huh?" I laughed, clapping his shoulder. "Just a call sign, Connor. You're a hero in your own way." From there, we started sharing more, not just about the military, but about life, family, and dreams we once thought impossible. Connor became my closest friend, something I never imagined possible. Lily, my sister, remained the easiest to be around. She didn't ask too much about my work, but always knew how to make me laugh. Once, she sent me a drawing by one of her students, a superhero sketch labeled Colonel Blake's Secret Hero. I hung it in my office, a reminder that even with all I had to hide, there were people who loved me for who I am. 7 years after Pendleton, at a Thanksgiving dinner in Colorado Springs, I witnessed the biggest shift in how my family saw me. My parents' house was decked out with twinkling lights and autumn wreaths. Guests included friends, neighbors, and a few veterans who served with my father. I wore a simple button-up shirt, trying to blend in as always, but this time things were different. As everyone gathered around the table, my father stood, raising a glass of wine. "I'd like to say a few words," he began, his voice deep and commanding. "The Blake family has always been proud of our military tradition. But today I want to honor someone special. My son, Major General Aiden Blake, a commander in the Army's Special Forces." The room erupted in applause. My face flushed, not from embarrassment but from emotion. For the first time I was acknowledged publicly, not as a logistics worker but as a soldier, a commander, a hero. My father looked at me, his eyes brimming with pride, and I saw my mother wipe away tears at the end of the table. After dinner, my mother led everyone to a corner of the living room, where she'd created a memorial area for me. It was a small table with my West Point graduation photo, a few public medals I was allowed to display, and a rare photo of me in uniform taken during an internal ceremony. "This is our Aiden," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't know how incredible our son was for so long, but now we want everyone to know." I stood there silent, my heart swelling. The years of living in the shadows, the lonely nights wondering if I was doing the right thing, all of it felt worth it in that moment. A month later, I stand before a mirror in my Fort Bragg office, adjusting my dress uniform with its gleaming insignia. Today is the day I'm promoted to Major General, a milestone I never thought I'd reach as a young cadet at West Point. The ceremony takes place in a grand hall on the base, attended by senior officers, teammates, and, for the first time, my family. As I step onto the stage, I see my father, mother, Connor, and Lily in the front row. My father, in his gray suit, nods at me, his eyes saying, "You did it." My mother holds Lily's hand, tears glistening on her cheeks. Connor, in his Marine uniform, flashes a proud smile. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm standing alone. General Harper, now retired but invited as a guest of honor, steps up to pin my new rank. "Aiden Blake," he says, his voice echoing through the hall, "you've served this country with courage, wisdom, and silent sacrifice. Today, we honor not just a soldier, but a leader." As the Major General stars are pinned to my shoulders, the crowd applauds, but my eyes are on my family. I see my mother stand, clapping fiercely, and my father, always stoic, rise too, his eyes misty. Connor lets out a whistle and Lily beams. In that moment, I'm no longer Ghost. I'm Aiden Blake, seen, recognized, and loved. The ceremony ends and my family stays to celebrate at a small restaurant near the base. We laugh, share stories, and for the first time I feel I can share part of my true self without fear. But I also know that even as a Major General, I carry secrets I can never reveal. There are missions, decisions, and memories that will forever remain in the shadows. As I see my family off at the airport, Connor grabs my shoulder and says, "Aiden, I'm proud to be your brother, but next time don't make me wait 7 years to know how awesome you are, okay?" I laugh, hug him, and promise to try. On the drive back, I reflect on my journey. From a young man burdened by family expectations, to a ghost living in secrecy, to a Major General recognized by those I love. I've learned that honor isn't just in medals or ranks, but in the moments I stand with the people I love, knowing they see me, truly see me. Sitting in my small office at Fort Bragg, with a family photo on my desk and the secret hero drawing from Lily's student hanging on the wall, I feel a rare sense of calm. At 42, I've walked through scorching deserts, smoke-filled alleys, and cold conference rooms where the fates of hundreds were decided with a nod of my head. But above all, I've journeyed inward, from a son burdened by family tradition to a soldier living in the shadows, to a man who's found balance between duty and kinship. My work with Delta Force, though now behind a desk, remains a world of secrets. There are nights I stay up poring over intelligence reports about a new threat in the Middle East, or approving plans for operations that I know will put my young teammates in harm's way. Those secrets, the details of missions, names, locations, will always be part of me, like the scars on my body and soul. But what I've learned through all those years is that silent sacrifice defines me not just as a soldier, but as a person. I think of the other Delta Force soldiers still out there, the nameless, faceless ghosts whose families and friends will never know their deeds. They are the true heroes, carrying the weight of silence to protect a world that often doesn't know they exist. My story, though eventually acknowledged by my family, is a rare exception. For many others, the light of recognition will never come, and I carry a deep respect for them. The Major General promotion ceremony changed everything, but not in the way I once feared. I worried that my family knowing the truth would distance them or lead to demands for details I couldn't share. Instead, they learned to respect my boundaries. My father, once my harshest critic, now calls weekly, asking about simple things like my health or weekend plans rather than probing into my work. Sitting in my office, looking out the window where sunlight filters through the trees at Fort Bragg, I reflect on the true meaning of my journey. Honor to me isn't in the medals or ranks, though they testify to what I've done. Honor lies in the moments I can protect those I love, whether on the battlefield or in their hearts. It's in standing tall, knowing I've fulfilled my duty even when no one else knows. My story is one of silent sacrifice, not just mine, but that of all the soldiers who live in the shadows to keep the world safe. I think of fallen teammates, those who never got to tell their stories, and I feel a responsibility to live well, not just for myself but for them. The recognition from my family is a precious gift, but I know the true value of my work lies not in the spotlight, but in the lives saved, the threats stopped, and the moments of peace the world gains through our silence. Now, as I prepare for another day as a Major General, I feel I've found the balance I once thought impossible. I'm still part of Delta Force, still carrying secrets I'll never share. But I no longer feel alone. My family, though not privy to every detail, has become my emotional anchor. They don't need to know the specifics of operations in Raqqa, Baghdad, or Yemen. They just need to know I'm Aiden, their son, brother, and a soldier who chose his path. I stand, adjust my uniform, and step out of the office. Today, I'll meet a team of young soldiers to discuss an upcoming operation. I'll pass on not just skills, but the spirit of a Delta soldier, the spirit of sacrifice, courage, and silence. And when I return home this weekend, I'll sit with my family, laugh, and savor moments I once thought I didn't deserve. My life, though still touched by shadows, is now illuminated by the love and recognition of those I hold dear. And that, to me, is the true meaning of being seen.